Welcome everyone on our 170th episode and beginning of a fresh season where we plan a lot of turnarounds for the future. But it gives me a great pleasure once again, or should I say thrice again, to welcome the much respected former Director General of Police and author Aloke Lal ji and his co-author, partner in crime, I must say, author and very, very renowned artist Maanas Lal. And today we discuss not only their latest book, Codename Stallion, which is a wonderful read, which is a true story which revolves around the hunt for a dreaded militant leader and is an account of one of India's top super cops' personal experiences during militancy in UP. But definitely today we'll discuss and go beyond and also talk about how crime stories take place and everything else. So welcome Alok ji and Manas.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, ma'am. It's wonderful to be here, and what a milestone. I think as you add episodes, it feels like a very personal achievement because of the way this channel has been run, the integrity with which it has been run, and also the kind of guests you have had. I think it's a service to literature, as I said last time when we spoke.
Thank you. You've been always so complimentary, like really motivates me. And I was telling Alokji earlier that we plan to definitely take it to a different level this year, have some milestones to meet, and I hope I can do that. So, Manas, to begin with you, what is the book all about? I've read the book, but I would like you to tell our viewers about it.
Well, it's actually a book about this phase in Uttar Pradesh's history, which both Mr. Alokelal and I felt was not documented so far, which was this phase of Khalistani militancy, which gripped the state in the early 90s. And as many would know, after the wave of militancy in Punjab had fanned out, um, the militants had sought refuge in what is known as the Terai region of UP. And that is where they then started committing crimes because once a militant, I think always a militant. And obviously, the cause they were fighting for was something which went against the interests of the country. And for a police which was grossly understaffed and also under-equipped to deal with the challenge of militancy, this was a very interesting time. So I knew for a fact that my co-author was posted in Pilibhit district at the time, and it was one of the hubs of militancy.
Absolutely.
So dealing with that, tackling that wave of militancy, in the search for a dreaded militant leader, whose code name was Mark Stallion. That's where the name of the book comes from, Codename Stallion. And what happened, what was the order of the day, how there were some killings, bank robberies, how informers of the police were bumped off, and how there were personal threats to our lives, and ultimately how this challenge was partly met by the police in Pilibhit and around, and then what eventually happened to a lot of people and a lot of innocent civilians too. So it's a very emotional book. I felt personally very invested while writing this book because I think it's ultimately the story. Not so much of the superintendent of police of Pilibhit, that is Alok Lal, but also of the common people who are impacted in the wake of something like this.
Absolutely. And wonderful read, definitely. And Alok Lalji, coming back to you because you were in the middle of the action at that moment of time. So it does read like a thriller, but we all know it's all real. So what was the most terrifying moment for you when, I wouldn't say terrifying, you were a super cop, you're never afraid, you were always so brave, but do you remember the most terrifying moment that you lived through while handling the militancy there in Pilibhit?
Thank you, Neeta, for giving this opportunity. But I must tell you that somehow the other adrenaline that runs through us when we are facing a situation which is potentially threatening, we often do not even feel what is going around us. It becomes a matter of facing the challenge, forgetting all that could happen to one's own life or one's own person. So, honestly, all this happened. And then when I look back, I realize that this could have been so terrible. So there is an instance which we have quoted in the book. On the opening day, practically, of our stay in the new district, and when Manas and I were both exposed to a threat, a serious threat of life. So, yes, When I look back at that, I think that a young toddler in my arms and I going around in the campus
My God.
and with those piercing eyes looking at us from some angles, I thought this was a challenge, but no. At that point in time, all this passed off as if nothing had happened.
So right. But Manas, your illustrations and art, I mean, you imagine so much when you're writing, when you're digitally converting your art pieces in such a magnificent way. But what is that one visual that perhaps deeply moved you while co-creating this book, while writing this book?
I think
You are a great visualizer.
I'll just pick up from where Mr. Lal left off. If you look at these two paintings behind me, they're
Mhm.
actually for my little baby. And I can't even imagine having a toddler in my arms and then, facing bullets soon after an assassination attempt. I mean, my first thought went out to the baby actually, because after being a parent, you suddenly feel all these emotions which you have never felt in life. So when I heard about the personal threats which were around us, that is something which deeply moved me. But I think the other thing and the biggest reason why both of us decided to write this book was actually uh, what comes towards the end of the book. That is the way in which a false encounter took place and how certain innocent civilians, fell victim to what you can call the more than long arms of law, which actually nab people
Too
who are
long.
not
Too long.
sometimes the wrongdoers. And in this case, it was a very unfortunate incident. And so when I heard about Ballu, that's where the book opens. And
Yes.
when I heard his story, it really broke my heart. And I thought that that should, in some ways, become the fulcrum of how we write this book.
And perhaps the most challenging part to write for you, apart from what you've just mentioned.
Definitely, particularly the dream sequence, which the book opens with, because when I was having a chat with uh, Mr. Lal, he was also telling me how he sometimes wakes up in cold sweat even today. In retrospect, as he told you that the fear is not there in the moment, but when
Mm.
you look back at certain things, it feels very different. And I think all of us have those small regrets in life. And when I heard him talk about a regret which he doesn't usually do as a person, yeah, that is something which stayed with me. And I think that became pretty much the foundation on which we built this book.
And how about Alokji? Do you think all what you went through and all about the story, there are few things that you had to really cut out from the book? I know you've been very frank, you've mentioned most of the things there. So was there something that perhaps Manas told you, let's not write this, let's not get this into the book? Was there anything, I know you maybe you would not like to confess that now, but anything that you feel had to be left out?
The one thing that we have studiously done in our writings is not to expose identities of people who are there.
Right.
Because even so many years down the line, there can be repercussions.
Hmm.
And as you know, our judiciary takes its own sweet time to decide things. So even this important case we have talked about is still with the Supreme Court. So, of course, one thing that we have avoided doing is criticizing anything that the courts do.
Hmm.
And we have no business to actually criticize them because they have their own rules and their own fields of play. And so they'll do it as if it is right. So, one is this, but we have certainly voiced our uh, displeasure with the fact that courts may be responsible partly, but the entire system is such that cases don't get resolved. A case started in my time may not end in Manas's son's time also. So this is how it happens. The fact remains that the cases which started in 1991 are still hanging. So what I'm trying to say is that this is one of those things we want to write very strongly about, but then the sledgehammer keeps us away.
And how about you, Manas? I mean, what is now that you've been part of so many, I mean, you've been always part of his stories, but now more so because you kind of put them all together. So, what is this one common misconception about this field that you would like to perhaps debunk through the books that you're writing? I mean, the
Misconception about the uniform or about authorship,
uniform,
ma'am?
how it happens. I mean, how reactive people can get, judgmental and everything. So, but all these books that you're writing are real stories through.
I I think the police for every common man is too near and yet too far, in the sense that every day you drive out, you see a cop on the road, and based on how that cop behaves, you take a decision on how the police of the state is working or what is happening behind the scenes. um, and we are very quick to judge as people. So since police is a first responder in many situations, we also see the negative side of the police very often, because of which the general image of the police in several states in the country is not very positive. And sometimes when we are not exposed to the work which goes on behind the scenes, or the sacrifices the average police officer has to make, to get through a day, and the kind of threats which the police faces. I'm sure many of your viewers would know that statistically, um, more policemen have lost their lives than any other armed force in the country since independence. And that in itself is a very revealing stat. It tells you the kind of threat which is faced by police in various capacities across the country. So I think the one misconception is that um, police to kuch nahi karti hai, which is a very common statement I hear from a lot of people. I think that is something which I have over the years, learned to understand and address in a better way. Because since my father was in the police, I was always a little defensive about the forces while I was in school. And so when somebody used to say something like this, when my peers said something like this, my instant reaction was to react strongly and say that you don't know anything or so on. But now I've realized that I have to take a more, balanced approach and accept flaws. I think which we do in our book also, and in other books too, where we are not trying to paint this very holier than thou image of the police either. We're being honest that yes, there are certain good things, there are certain bad things, but to understand the magnitude of the challenge that the police and also the other armed forces of the country face on a daily basis, is something we really want to, get to the reader. And I am glad that so far, from what I've heard from the readers and the reviews, they do now, somewhat empathize with the police and see that side of work also, which is often hidden from the public eye.
Absolutely, absolutely, you've hit the nail. But Alokji, tell me, if one of the young listeners or perhaps one of the young readers comes to you who's totally inspired by you, in hindsight, what is one thing that you would tell them not to do? I
Not to do.
mean, not to do. I mean, inspired by you, by your story, by your books, but something in hindsight that you.
One thing that I can tell generation now
Hmm.
is to avoid WhatsApp history. Understanding the world through the frame of WhatsApp is something that should be avoided. It's very misleading. So they should pore over the books, read real history, try to understand what happened around them. They should understand the nation more closely by going into the areas where they think there is a problem. If they hear about a problem, they should go to that area and understand what is happening. Of course, it's not possible for everyone to travel, but they can hear real stories from people who can tell them. So, my feeling is that one of the things that anybody must avoid, not just the youngsters, but anybody who should, is to fall for false propaganda, which is unfortunately
The
one
WhatsApp.
of the things that is all around us. So I think it's for you, Nita, and for me and others like Manas who are very aware to tell fellow beings that,
So
see, this is not done, this is not right.
absolutely, absolutely. You're so right, because this is what the conversation nowadays is all about. When you look at movies like adolescents on TV, and everybody seems to be talking, or you talk about what is happening in US right now. But Manas, just carrying on from there in a lighter note, if you had to describe your book using only emojis, which ones would you choose?
That's a very interesting question. And I'm not great with emojis, I must confess before I answer that.
So we
Um,
can't totally give up on social media. There's always this fun factor too. Yeah.
um,
Sorry.
I don't know. I think is there an emoji which denotes, which conveys resolve? Uh, there's that, yeah. There's that emoji with a
Yeah.
fist there. So I think that one, followed by maybe a little bit of anger.
Yeah.
I think that also comes across. So the angry emoji there,
Yes.
and then eventually some kind of peace which prevails as time goes by. So I think a combination of resolve, a little bit of anger, and then eventually as time has gone by, with a few dots in between, peace.
And
Yeah.
if I may come in here, Manas, if I were to ask you to paint an image appropriate for this book, I
Hmm.
will not go beyond the first chapter, Ballu, because that dream sequence brings everything into just a few pages.
Yeah, but
I think
I
that is
I can't really sum that chapter up into an emoji because that's the primary question. The only emoji I can actually think of is like the teary-eyed one. If whenever I think of that chapter, and that is something I want to consciously avoid when talking about the book because it does get me a little emotional thinking about that young boy. Mm.
So right. Very, very well said. I just thought, when we were talking about the WhatsApp thing, I would rather get in this question.
Yeah.
But Alokji, one thing that when you see your readers reacting the way they do, they have always loved your books, they have always been inspired by your stories. But especially this one, how do you want your readers, especially perhaps the podcast audience that I have, to feel when they close this book or finish this episode? What do you want them to feel about the book? What is that one takeaway that you perhaps remember from the episode that you had, several episodes that you had in Pilibhit? How would you like them to remember?
this book comes with a very straightforward message.
Hmm.
अपना काम करो और फल की इच्छा मत करो. So if that is the message we got it from that great book, I
Hmm.
think that is the one here also, that you get into the job, do everything that you can at your best and try and deliver and wait for the results to come. The results will happen this way or that. Uh, So this is a message this book has. That of course it has a lot of description about all things, and so people can become aware of the kind of situations a police force has to go through. I think the people will also be happy to read about the interrogations which were held in
Oh, right.
Astabal.
Yeah.
Those Astabal interrogations give an image
Hmm.
of, if I were to ask Manas to draw another image, I
Yeah.
would think of those
Well,
horse riding stuff
yeah.
to be interposed with some humans.
I'm sure if he had designed the cover, he would have put in all this, right?
I don't know, ma'am. I think the publishers have done a great job with the cover. But one thing I would like to add to that answer,
Hmm.
I think one thing which would stay with any reader, or I hope stays with any reader after this book, is this deep sense of hurt about how sometimes a lot of effort does not bring you any results. In fact, it does just the opposite. And you still have to accept those circumstances in life and move on. I think from later in Mr. Lal's career, people have read accounts in other books. And so they will understand that in spite of such major disappointments, I think life goes on. And that is the larger message for victims of crime, for those who are at the wrong end of law enforcement agencies, for officers who want to do the right thing but are sometimes unable to, and for everybody else. I think eventually there is some hope at the end of that dark and dreary tunnel, even if it is the passage of time. So that is something I do feel.
I know, definitely. I mean, there will be hope, definitely, and also with the implementation of things like Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita. What do you feel about that? I mean, how do you perceive these changes which are happening now, impacting law enforcement and the justice system in India? How do you think that really helps? Because they are going to do away with the IPC, BNS is coming in since March
Neither
2000.
these books don't appear to me to be a very honest attempt at improving things.
Hmm.
We need a complete overhaul of the system, as a matter of fact. The last chapter, the closing lines of the last chapter say it all. How terrible is the system? If you have the time, I'll read out a couple of
Please,
lines from
that'd
there.
be such a pleasure and honor.
I'll start here. I'm sorry, just a minute.
No, don't worry. We have all the time.
As I was saying, that takes long time for things to resolve in the courts, and the courts should be conscious of why it is happening, and the lawgivers of the country should be very aware of what is happening. And we have said that the dreaded militant lived such a charmed life, yet he was never. The victims, and I quote from my book, page number 165. It says, the victims of these egregious acts are left licking their unhealable wounds. Seeking justice from the courts of law comes at a price which very few can afford. The most common denouement of the long drawn, intricate legal processes is, more often than not, pain heaped on an insurmountable load of grief. The entire justice system is crying out for reforms, if not an overhaul. I think it begins with the recording of the FIR. Let's say a crime happens and people come for FIR. Now, lodging an FIR itself is intricate. But let us look at the new law which has come. It is written in chaste Hindi, and therefore, even I, who comes from a Hindi-speaking area,
I am
has to
unable
first
to
look at
pronounce.
a dictionary. Anyways, so having said that, lodging an FIR was never very easy because there are so many intricacies associated with it. And then there is a uh, general attitude amongst police officers not to easily record a crime. So have we made that easier? No, I don't think through this. Then going through the investigation, has the work of the victim, well, the victim is the person who is most affected and therefore should be in a position to help the police officer doing the investigation the most. Do we take the victim into confidence? And does this new set of laws make it more amenable to this idea? This is the question. Then the investigation itself. Has the investigating officer been given any additional powers to be able to do something? Yes, a few, but not enough. Then we go to a court of law. In the court of law, a case has to be proved. Then only that means something. Otherwise, taking months altogether to first investigate the case and take it to the court of law, where the court of law will decide upon it. As I was just reading, the cases are decided, say, at the base level in the district courts, and they go on and on and on. And there are cases in the beginning of the century, actually, right in the first year of the 2000, the year 2000. Um, we had a case which was investigated by CBI about a certain corruption act in my department. That case is still not decided at the CBI court level in Dehradun. It has to then go to a high court and a Supreme Court and so on. So you can well understand that 25 years down the line, we are still struggling with that case. So there should have been something substantial in these new sets of laws to make all this, more far free flowing. It is not so. I don't think the courts are going to benefit from the new laws, or the victims are going to be served justice faster.
Or do you think it's still too early to kind of rule it out? Because I think it came up in March 2023, BNS. It'll take time for it to grow.
One can compare with what was there before and what has
Definitely.
happened now.
Yeah.
The results will not show you anything. Because if one case has taken 20 years, another may take 19. So will you say that there is improvement? So these are big figures, huge figures. Consider a person who faced an act at the age of 20, it becomes middle-aged by the time the matter is decided. And so by then, all opportunities to make a life out of one's own existence, it goes off. So I think this is one area which should have been very strongly addressed. And my feeling is that that effort is not there.
Absolutely. And you've seen it all through your eyes, so you're definitely feeling it so closely. But as a common man, we also feel that lots to be done, especially in the areas that you've just pointed out. And what do you have to say to this, Manas? You want to add something to this really
The Honorable Supreme
focused?
Court of India had ruled in Prakash Singh versus the Union that the police reforms need to be implemented in all states across India, which gave some kind of functional autonomy to the police. Today, more than a decade after that judgment, uh,
That came in 2006, Manas.
oh, more than nearly 2 decades after that judgment, not a single state has, well, even in small measure, really gone into the depth of those reforms which are needed in the police. So, unless we give some kind of functional autonomy to the police, it's very difficult for us to accept the wheels of justice to move at a faster pace and without that screechy sound which they usually make.
You're so right, and but in sometimes figures like these comes, like in Delhi, for example, it's reported a significant drop in street crimes and rape cases in early 2025. But do you believe what factors would have contributed to this decline and how sustainable are these improvements vis-a-vis what we've just spoken? Or these are just once in a time figures that the government is quoting that there's been uh, in Delhi at least early 2025 the cases have come down. Do you think
Are you asking me, Neeta?
yes you
Yes, these ups and downs do happen, but they do not really paint the whole picture. And if I may say so, there is a sleight of hand also associated with bringing down crime. Because if we do not record a crime, obviously it will not show on paper. So, one of those tricks which governments have been playing on the public at large is not to register cases easily, make it so difficult for the victim to go and seek justice that it doesn't show on paper. So, this is one thing. The other is that I don't know if we read the same newspaper or not, but those living in Delhi are not certainly supporting this claim that the
claim is
crime has
coming
come
up in
down.
media somehow, but maybe few tens cases are coming down, or not even hundreds, but they say it's done so. But I feel what is the sustainability? I mean, unless there are solutions, unless we
Hmm.
constructively do something, things are still unsafe for us in Delhi.
Solutions keep coming, Neeta. We have the Law Commission coming up with proposals. We have the Malimat committee which went into it. The National Police Commission went into it for a long time and came up with voluminous recommendations. The Supreme Court, as Manas mentioned, heard a case for about 12, 13 years, and then finally came up with the judgment in 2006 that the police needs reforms, and very detailed instructions were issued to the states. Most of the states have not followed those instructions, and those which have diluted all those instructions to the extent that they have hardly made a ripple anywhere.
So absolutely on the dot. But Manas, you've been the co-creator of so many books with Alok ji. He's been such a acclaimed IPS officer and an author with you now. But how do you balance, because you do that writing part with him, how do you balance the portrayal of real life criminal investigations in literature while maintaining the confidentiality, while maintaining the ethical considerations? You both do it pretty well, but I'm sure that's a challenge to do that.
It is definitely a challenge, and I think a part of one's brain is always consciously keeping in mind that this is a book for the common reader,
Hmm.
and must not read like an FIR, which is a very formal and official document. So not only is there a conscious effort to keep the thrill going, but also writing the emotional parts of the book and planning for certain moments in the book to really land in the hearts of the person going through the chapter is something we consciously work on. I think both of us understand our strengths as writers well. We divide our work well, and so when it comes to certain things, like for instance, dialogues heavy on emotion or personal feelings, I'm given that part to write often. And when it comes to police procedure, getting something bang on technically, or going into details of judgments, that is something which my co-author is much better than me at. So since we respect each other's strengths and then give the other person the complete freedom
Hmm.
to proofread what has been written, that really helps our team click. So we are very clear on how we are going to divide our work, and I think that's why it comes together and eventually makes what you can call a readable book. Hmm.
What are the next books coming up, Alokji? What are your next plans? What is it?
We
Uh,
already have we already have one book lined up,
okay.
and we have requested the publisher to wait a while because this book, Codename Stallion, has just come. So we will not like this to clash with the new one.
Yeah.
So that one will be coming out very soon. That is about a story from Kerala.
Okay.
And we have two other books lined up in the next 2 years. We are
Oh
deliberately now
God.
going slow. We don't want to write more than a book in a year, although the material is available and we already have the publishers keen to come out with those books, but we are telling them to hold on for a while. So you will get a few books more in the years coming.
Lovely, lovely. And I must tell the viewers about this wonderful crime literature festival that you both have conceptualized and running it together. And such great authors visit. I keep on seeing, and I must visit it definitely the next time. And also,
Yes.
Manas, I think, has been very active being the secretary of the Doon Literature Society, is it?
It is the Doon Cultural and Literary Society. Yes, I am very fortunate to be the secretary, and I also curate the festival along with a friend of mine who runs this wonderful bookstore called Book World. I must say that it's not just the two of us; it's a large team of people, and I'm very happy that the festival has been received so well. And definitely, ma'am, we would love for you to be a part of the festival this year. We've already announced the dates, and yeah, it's going to be very exciting. I think last year was much bigger than the inaugural edition of the festival, and we are hoping to go one better this year, have even better authors and also people from cinema who write these stories and take them to screen, directors, actors, and also screenwriters, script writers. So, well, this also promises to be a great addition, and yeah, it's actually a lot of work. When we started off, we had no idea that it's going to become a festival larger than we had originally thought. So I'm glad, and it was an idea conceptualized in the bookstore I was talking about, Book World. Just three people brainstorming,
Hmm.
which is Mr. Lal, me, and my friend Siddhant. And from there, now today we have this festival. 2 editions later, it feels a little surreal, also. But I must say, it's a challenge to sort of be behind the scenes in literature festival and feel responsible for everything that goes on. But I think that has helped us not just in terms of our organizational skills or how to bring people together, but also as authors, we understand fellow authors much better. And I think sticking to the crime genre has been a good idea because there is a
Yeah.
lot of material and a lot of work which happens in this particular genre, and it really captures the fancy of the audience also.
Yeah, it is, I think, one unique concept that you launched, and it's very specific, and you have very specific authors also coming in. Though now I see, I'm sure a lot of people queue up now to come to your festival. So, Alokji, what do you think about the entire, you started with a book after your career, and now it's branched out into literature festival. So much you're contributing to the literature scene. So I'm sure you never thought this is how it is going to branch out.
Nita, in a relatively short time,
Yeah, very short.
beginning around 2014, 2015, and over the years, the proliferation of the e suppliers, that is, I'm talking about things like Flipkart and Amazon,
Mm.
from where books are being ordered, books available on the electronic reading gadgets. Uh, my feeling is that there is a struggle for bookshops to remain in place. And I have seen around me, not in Dehradun, luckily, but in many other places, including Lucknow, where there used to be
Yes.
some wonderful bookshops where you could get good reading material, the latest bestsellers, and even other books which were uh, rated as classics and all that, they were available. But now these bookshops are just selling textbooks, immediate requirement of the student of the day. And this morning I read the very sad news that the bookshop called Bestseller in Srinagar, Kashmir,
Oh my God.
has now been shut down. There were great books they had, and their attitude was out of a passion for making people read, and so they were giving huge discounts from their bookshop. But now people don't want to go all the way to a bookshop. They are sitting at home and ordering books. And so these bookshops are facing a problem. So my feeling is that people like you, who are working so hard to keep books alive, and some of us authors who are writing these books despite all the challenges, I think we are doing a good job and we should continue it. I must congratulate you on keeping book readers in mind when you come up with these podcasts.
Thank you. Thank you so
Yeah.
much. Coming back to the bookshop, I just had one thing because I'm in London every second month nowadays. See the number of bookshops there are. See the number of people who queue up to buy books. There's such wonderful bookshops there. I hope that culture comes back to India. I hope we are able to replicate that. You have Waterstones there, Dawn Books, such wonderful bookshops. People love going to the bookshops and browsing. And it's sad that it is happening less in India. And I'm sure all of us doing a little bit of work in our own way will books will come back also from Kindle. They'll buy the hard books. That's more important, I feel.
Yes,
But
yes,
thank you
absolutely.
so much. It's been such a wonderful conversation. But I would like to have your last words on the book, both of you, Manas, and
Um,
yes, Alex.
my last words are always that please buy the book, because
I'll
ultimately
take a
it's
picture of all of us.
yes,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah,
Thank you.
yes.
I think it's extremely important for books to be read.
Hmm.
Um, I know that some people have, in fact, quite a few people have gone ahead and already purchased the book, and I feel very fortunate. But I feel this is a story which should reach as many people as possible. It's a part of our lived history which we know very little about. And I think my co-author touched upon this idea that history as a subject is very misunderstood these days, particularly because of the proliferation of social media. And sometimes what one learns of history is through an Instagram reel or through a WhatsApp message. And that's really not the way to go about understanding history, or for that matter, any other subject. And so to understand our lives, where we come from, and what we have faced as a nation, not just our police force but the common people of this country, and at what juncture we are, say, so many years, nearly 80 years post independence, as a country which makes its citizens, or which is responsible for protecting its citizens and their rights. um, that is something which a book like this, I think, really puts out in front of you and makes you think. um, I'll say that yes, this book is a thriller, definitely, but it also has elements of personal strife. It has elements of um,
Empathy also.
empathy. It has elements of raw hurt. I think some things which are not some
Hmm.
associated with quote unquote thrillers these days. And
Absolutely.
that's the reason I would
That's
really
the
like
bug,
people to pick up this book, because we have also taken a bit of a risk. I think so far our writing has been a little different from how this book is written,
I would say.
and I would love for it to reach more readers, so that I can also get some honest reviews on what they think of how this book has been presented. Because you were actually putting out something extremely personal, and sometimes when you're so close to the subject, it's difficult to judge your own work. So I'm just looking forward to people knowing who Mark Stallion was, what was that time like in UP, how difficult it was for policemen and their families, how difficult it was for the common man, and how it is to live in an atmosphere where there is
Mm.
crime all around.
Absolutely. Very well said. You've taken the content out of the book, I'm sure, and it's my feelings exactly. Alokji, what would you like to say before we end the?
About the book, I say that this has a few messages for all sets of people, for all age groups, and so it's worthwhile reading this. We have given two sides of the picture, not just one.
Mm.
We have shown the victims, their plight, and we have also shown how a police force deals with these situations and what sometimes goes wrong. So while I'm not seeking empathy or sympathy for what police does, exactly not, but I am also looking at people to know that what is wrong. Sometimes these acts of false bravery are played up so much that people start uh, applauding them.
Hmm.
And so we must point out that these are not acts which should be applauded. People should have a very serious look at it and should realize that they could one be at some time in the future be at the receiving end, not just as the bystander. So we have to be very careful about how the police must work. And through this book, we can understand the challenges as well as the pitfalls. So my feeling is that this book is going to play an important role amongst those who read it about understanding what police is all about.
Absolutely. Very, very well said. And we've had such a wonderful conversation today. And I have loved the book, and I request everyone to go through the book, write reviews. I'm sure the authors would love to have a review from you. We'll put the link of the book on the in the chat box when the conversation is on the YouTube. And thank you so much. It's been a pleasure, definitely.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, Nita. Thank you. So kind of you. Thank you
I
very much.
must thank Trends Literature Series once again for always giving us this platform. I think the way you do it, the earnestness and the integrity with which you put out your content is something which inspires all authors. And thank you so much once again, ma'am.
One last thing, Anita. I
Yes.
want to thank our literary agent, Sohail Mathur, and I
Okay.
also want to thank the publisher of this book, Srishti Publishers, because they have brought out this book and they are asking us to write some more for them. So obviously, we are thankful to them for having not
Yeah.
just brought out this book, but they are very keen to bring out some others. So all these things happen only because a team comes together. The
Absolutely.
publisher says yes. Luckily now the publishers are approaching us, so it's a different situation. Um, yet I must thank this publisher for having stood by us and brought this book out.
Well, I'm sure you have a great publishing team. Definitely. So thank you everyone for joining us today, and do subscribe to our channel so that this
Yes. Please,
conversation.
if I may add that, please
Yes.
like, share, and subscribe. I think, take it everywhere. Because this is the kind of channel which will help literature grow.
Thank you so much. I'm privileged to be
Thank you,
part
Nita.
of
Thank you.
this. Thank
Thank you,
you.
ma'am. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.